They say airports are places of transition. Nobody truly belongs there. People arrive. People leave. Nobody stays. That's what made the 24/7 diner next to Terminal B at the Mason Ridge Regional Airport a kind of paradox. A place where time pretended to stand still while the world flew past in blinking departures and fleeting arrivals. My name's Connor Reyes, 28 years old, ex-line cook, ex-junkie, ex-lots of things. After I got clean, I needed something steady, a paycheck, a rhythm, something boring enough to keep me sane. That's how I ended up at Sky Bites, the only all-night diner within 50 miles of the Nevada Desert Airstrip that locals called the Runway to Nowhere. The first night I arrived for training, the manager, a bone-thin woman named Rhonda, greeted me without even looking up from her clipboard. She smelled like mothballs and lemons. "You're here for nights," she said, her voice dry as the surrounding desert. "You work 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. You don't get to pick your music, and you don't get to ask the customers questions." "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, bewildered. Rhonda handed me a laminated sheet. It looked more like a ritual than a rule list. Rules for the night shift, Sky Bites Diner. 1. Never enter booth 9, even if someone is sitting there. 2. If a customer orders the special, serve them whatever is on the grill, even if the grill is empty. 3. From 2:13 a.m. to 2:33 a.m., the lights will flicker. Do not try to fix them. Do not acknowledge it. 4. The man with no luggage is a regular. He pays an exact change. Do not speak to him unless spoken to. 5. If you hear a knocking from the walk-in freezer, do not open it. It will stop eventually. 6. Once a week, a pilot will enter with blood on his shirt. He'll order black coffee and stare at gate 6. Serve him and leave him alone. 7. The mirrors in the bathroom show a 5-minute delay. Do not rely on them. 8. You will see flights arrive that are not on the schedule. Do not question them. Do not follow the passengers. "Is this some kind of prank?" I asked, half laughing. Rhonda looked up, and for the first time I saw her eyes. Flat, colorless, not tired, drained. "You'll understand," she said simply, "and if you don't, you won't be around long enough to care." My first night felt like I had stepped into a strange dream. The airport itself was oddly empty, more like a set piece than a functioning transport hub. 1 or 2 red-eye flights per night, tops. The diner, though? People kept coming in, and not the usual crowd either. My first customer was a woman in a stewardess outfit from the 1970s. I only noticed when she paid. Her money was dated 1975. Crisp, smelled like ozone. I almost said something, but then I remembered rule number 4. She didn't have luggage. She ordered the special. The grill was cold. I hadn't cooked anything. But the second I turned toward it, there was something. A steaming plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, sitting there like it had always been. I didn't cook it. Nobody did. I served it anyway. Around 2:13 a.m., the lights flickered. Not like a power surge, more like breathing. The fluorescent tubes above the counter began pulsing, dimming in slow, hypnotic patterns. I gripped the counter instinctively, feeling like gravity had shifted. My reflection in the napkin holder didn't move with me. It just stared. I didn't fix the lights, didn't acknowledge them. Eventually, they steadied. At 2:45 a.m., a man walked in. Gray suit, clean-shaven, carrying nothing. He sat at the counter, ordered black coffee, paid an exact change, $1.83. He looked up at me with strange intensity. "Still new?" he asked. I didn't answer. He nodded approvingly. "Good, don't talk, not yet." He sipped, and for the next 15 minutes, neither of us said another word. In the lull between customers, I peeked into the bathroom to freshen up. That's when I remembered rule number 7. I looked into the mirror anyway. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't doing what I was doing. I lifted my hand. The reflection stayed still. I turned my head. It kept facing forward. 5 minutes delayed. My ass. It smiled. I didn't. I backed away slowly and closed the door. By 4 a.m., I was alone, or so I thought. That's when I heard it, the knocking. Thump, 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 from the walk-in freezer. "Don't open it," I whispered to myself, clutching the rule sheet. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then a voice, my voice, whispered from the other side. "Connor, it's okay. You can open it now. I'm you." I ran. At 5:10 a.m., a flight landed, except no arrivals were scheduled after 3:45 a.m. Still, the automatic doors opened and passengers flooded in, dozens of them, all dressed in old-fashioned clothes, aviator jackets, bell-bottoms, leather luggage. Their faces looked like wax, too smooth, too pale. One of them sat in booth number 9. I froze. Rule number 1 screamed in my head. Rhonda had told me, even if someone is sitting there. I avoided eye contact. I felt him watching me. Just a vague pressure, like a heat lamp turned toward the back of my skull. I took a dishcloth, started wiping the counter, pretending to be busy. That's when I noticed the time. 6:06 a.m. My shift was nearly over. At exactly 7 a.m., Rhonda walked in, like clockwork. "You lasted the whole night," she said with no hint of surprise. "What's in the freezer?" I asked, breathless. She smiled, faint and humorless. "Nothing and everything. Depends on who opens it." "And booth 9? You'll learn," she said, then paused. "Or you won't." She handed me a small, handwritten card. "Next shift, same time tomorrow. Bring your own lighter." No explanation. Just that. I stepped outside into the sharp Nevada morning, sunlight hitting the tarmac like glass shards. The airport looked normal again. No strange flights, no eerie passengers, but something had changed. In me. As I walked past the row of tinted windows, I glanced sideways, and in the reflection, I saw myself walking behind me, smiling. The second night, something inside me hesitated before I walked through the diner doors. The glass squeaked as I pushed it open, that same cheap scent of grease, bleach, and stale coffee filling my lungs. The diner looked identical to the night before. Every chair sat in its place. The linoleum floors glistened under the flickering lights, and the air still held that artificial coldness that didn't belong in the desert. Rhonda wasn't there this time. A note sat on the counter, scribbled in red ink on a receipt pad. "Connor, don't stare at the clock above the coffee machine after 3:30 a.m. tonight. That clock lies." I didn't question how she knew I'd be back. I didn't question how she knew I'd even look at the clock. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash without reading it again. By 11:35 p.m., the first customer walked in. Same gray suit, no luggage. He took the same seat, third stool from the right. His coins clinked quietly as he placed them on the counter, $1.83 exactly, the way he had the night before. "You're still alive," he said softly. I gave him his coffee. The blackness of it shimmered faintly, like oil catching light that wasn't there. "Do they all come back?" I asked before I could stop myself. The man tilted his head, then leaned forward ever so slightly. "They all think they'll quit. They all say one more night. But this place remembers you." He didn't say another word after that. Just sipped slowly and stared toward the empty window facing the tarmac. The terminal across the street blinked with dead neon. A red light pulsed on a faraway tower, but no planes moved. The air felt heavier tonight. At 12:50 a.m., a woman entered the diner. I recognized her instantly. The same 1970s flight attendant from the night before. She looked exactly the same, down to the curl of her hair, the slight smudge of lipstick on her front tooth. She smiled at me. The corners of her mouth didn't move naturally, as if her face was remembering how to smile rather than performing the act. "I'll take the special," she said. I turned toward the grill. Cold, empty. But when I opened the clamshell lid of the prep station, there it was again. Meatloaf. Mashed potatoes, steaming like it had been waiting for me all night. I served her. She nodded, took a bite, then stood up without finishing. As she walked out, I saw something fall from her jacket pocket. A boarding pass. I picked it up. Flight 477, Departure Gate 6, August 2nd, 1974. I placed it in the drawer and shut it slowly. The air around me shifted. Not colder, not warmer, just wrong. Like something had moved inside the walls. At 2:13 a.m., the lights began flickering again. This time I didn't flinch. I sat on the stool behind the counter, back straight, pretending I didn't notice the pulses of light growing slower, more rhythmic. The ceiling above the booths began to look deeper than it should, like a dark sky instead of an ordinary tile grid. I kept my eyes down. The lights returned to normal at 2:33 exactly. Then it happened. The door creaked open without a sound. I looked up, and booth 9 was no longer empty. He was sitting there. Not a man, not really. He wore a pilot's uniform, but the colors were all wrong, washed out as if bleached. His cap sat low on his head. I couldn't see his eyes. His hands were folded in front of him, unmoving. I froze. My first instinct was to approach him, offer a menu, coffee, anything, But rule 1, never enter booth 9, even if someone is sitting there. I busied myself with the condiments, cleaned a ketchup bottle that didn't need cleaning. Every few seconds, I glanced back toward the booth. He hadn't moved, but I could feel him watching me, not from his face, but from something underneath it, like his attention was pressing against my skin. I tried turning away. When I looked back again, a note had appeared on the table in front of him. It hadn't been there before. I took 3 steps toward the booth before I caught myself. I didn't touch the note, didn't even read it. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and waited behind the swinging door, my heart hammering in my chest. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe minutes, maybe longer. When I finally returned to the counter, booth 9 was empty again. The note was gone. I returned to the front, pouring myself a cup of coffee that tasted like metal. The steam curled upward into a shape that looked almost like a hand. Then the door opened again. A man stepped inside. His pilot uniform was torn across the chest. Blood stained his shirt. His eyes looked straight ahead, glassy and distant. He walked to the counter, sat down, and spoke without turning. Black coffee. I poured it without hesitation. He didn't touch the cup, just stared out the diner window, past the terminal, past the runway, as if watching something arrive that only he could see. It was 3:46 a.m. I caught myself turning toward the clock above the coffee machine. I remembered the note. Don't stare at the clock after 3:30 a.m. I looked anyway. The hands weren't moving, but the second hand was, and it was going backwards. I looked away fast. The mirror in the napkin dispenser caught my eye again. My reflection stood behind me this time, not doing what I was doing. Its mouth was open. I wasn't speaking. It whispered something. I couldn't hear it. I closed the dispenser and looked at the floor. When I looked back up, the pilot was gone. No door had opened, no sound, just gone. I didn't question it. I just cleaned the empty cup. At 5:12 a.m., another flight arrived. Again, it wasn't on the schedule. The screen above the counter had been turned off, but I could see faint static moving across its surface. Passengers stepped in. Their clothes were soaked, even though it hadn't rained in the desert in weeks. They dripped puddles on the tile. One of them, an old man with thick glasses and a torn scarf, looked directly as he passed. He didn't speak. He pointed toward booth 9. It was occupied again. I didn't look. I kept my head down. By 6:06 a.m., the diner was empty once more. I sat at the counter, breathing slowly, waiting for the end of my shift. I expected Rhonda to walk in at exactly 7 a.m. again. She didn't. Instead, the lights dimmed and the freezer door creaked slightly. No knock this time, just the faint hum of something alive behind it. I ignored it. Then, as if on cue, the door to the diner opened. No breeze, no footsteps. A single matchbook slid across the floor, stopping at my feet. It was from Skybites, written on the inside cover in handwriting that was definitely mine. Don't light it unless you're ready to see what's behind booth 9. I didn't pick it up. I watched it for a long time, then swept it into the trash. I clocked out and walked into the sunlight. But this time, I didn't see my reflection. I saw the man from booth 9 staring back at me, and he smiled. I told myself I wasn't coming back for a third night. I even drove past the airport once, heading toward the highway with every intention of quitting. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the lights of the diner growing smaller in my rearview mirror. The sky was still black, dotted with scattered stars, but something about the air felt wrong. Like the night wasn't just darkness, but a heavy curtain waiting to drop. I turned around without knowing why. Back in the parking lot, the neon sign above the diner buzzed faintly. One of the letters was flickering now, just the Y in Skybites, blinking on and off like Morse code. Inside, everything was exactly where I had left it. The chairs were still flipped down, the ketchup bottles still full, the same old burnt smell clinging to the air vents. My name tag sat on the counter, cleaned, polished, waiting. The moment I stepped in, the door clicked shut behind me, not slammed, just clicked, like something had confirmed my presence and locked it in. I checked the schedule taped to the kitchen door. It had changed. My name was no longer listed for 5 nights a week. Now it said, until further notice, no one else was on the roster. At 11:21 p.m., the freezer hummed. At 11:42 p.m., the lights flickered. Not the breathing pulse this time, but a jagged, angry strobe that made the tiles look like they were shifting. I blinked rapidly, trying to steady my vision, but the floor refused to stay still. For a few seconds, the entire diner tilted. Plates in the drying rack rattled. The coffee pot nearly tipped. Then everything settled. I walked toward the bathroom. My legs felt heavier than usual, like I was walking underwater. The bathroom door creaked open slower than before, as if it had aged since yesterday. Inside, the air was cold enough to see my breath. The mirror greeted me with silence. I stepped up to the sink and splashed water on my face. When I looked back up, my reflection was already staring at me, mouth slightly open, lips moving without sound. I leaned closer. My reflection blinked. I hadn't. Then it mouthed something. I read the lips slowly. "Don't look at the sky tonight." The mirror fogged over. When it cleared, my reflection was back in sync, but I no longer trusted it. At 12:30 a.m., a new customer arrived. This one didn't walk in through the door. He was just sitting there, third stool from the left, middle-aged, heavy coat, gloves on, no sound, no movement. I didn't hear the bell above the door, didn't hear footsteps. He didn't speak until I was behind the counter. "It's cold," he said. I nodded. "It is." He turned slowly to face me. His eyes weren't human, not glowing, not monstrous, just vacant, like they had seen too much and erased it to survive. "Coffee?" He shook his head. "Just the static tonight." Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small handheld radio. He placed it on the counter and clicked it on. No music, no voices, just static. But beneath the hiss, something moved. A voice, distant and slow, breaking through in fragments. "Gate, closed, back, flight never." Then more static. The man never took his eyes off me. "Turn it off," I whispered. He didn't. He just stared until the radio shut itself off. Then he got up and walked toward booth 9. I panicked. "No, wait," I said instinctively, but he walked right into the booth, sat down, looked around as if he'd done it before. No alarms, no signs, no rules enforcing themselves. I didn't know what to do. Should I stop him? Should I watch? I turned to the kitchen for just a moment. When I looked back, the man was gone. Not a trace. Just the radio sitting on the table in booth 9, still hissing faintly, whispering things I couldn't understand. At 2:10 a.m., I made the mistake of looking out the diner window. The tarmac was glowing, not from the airport lights, from something else, something beneath it. Lines pulsed through the concrete like veins beneath skin, red and blue, slow and rhythmic, like something asleep was beginning to stir. Then I looked up. The sky wasn't the sky. It was a dome, metal and black and glistening, curving far above the airport like a planetarium projection. The stars weren't stars, they were lights, tiny artificial specks that blinked in sequence. The moon flickered. I stumbled back, heart racing. A soft knock came from the freezer. Once, then twice, then again. This time I didn't run. I stood my ground, my back to the kitchen, my eyes on the counter. Then it spoke again, the same voice I had heard before. "Connor, come on, I'm not here to hurt you. Just open it." It sounded more tired now, less urgent. I clenched my fists and shouted, "What do you want?" No answer. But the knock came one final time, slow, resigned, then silence. At 3:27 a.m., I turned toward the clock above the coffee machine, not on purpose, just instinct. It was blank. The hands were gone. The numbers were melting downward like wax. I looked away fast. In the reflection on the coffee pot, I saw the dining area behind me. Every booth was now occupied. Dozens of customers, silent, still. Some wearing suits, others in pajamas, some in clothes soaked with what looked like mud or ash. Every face turned toward me. But when I turned around, the booths were empty. I didn't check the reflection again. At 4:44 a.m., the man in the pilot uniform entered. His shirt was clean this time. No blood, but his hands trembled as he sat down. He didn't ask for coffee. He simply whispered, "Gate 6 is open again." Then he stood up and left. He didn't even sit for more than a minute. His presence lingered like smoke. I glanced at the arrivals board. It was still off. But the Gate 6 light across the terminal was blinking. I didn't look too long. The sun was supposed to rise by 6:15 a.m. It didn't. The outside world remained pitch black. I checked my phone. No service, no clock, just the word recalibrating across the screen. Then the diner lights dimmed again. Booth 9 creaked. Someone was sitting there. I didn't move. The figure lifted a hand and motioned for me to come closer. I refused, but my legs disobeyed. Step by step, I moved toward the booth, even as every fiber in my body screamed to stop. I reached the table. There was a photograph lying there, of me, taken from behind the counter. But in the picture, I wasn't alone. Behind me stood a second version of myself. No name tag, no face, just black eyes, and that version was smiling. I turned the photo over. There was something written in pencil. Only one of you makes it to sunrise. I backed away slowly. The diner was empty again. But I no longer trusted the space behind me, and I didn't know if the me inside the reflection was still waiting to switch places. By the time the clock on the wall began working again, the sun still hadn't risen. The diner was soaked in that deep blue light that comes just before dawn, except it felt like it had been like that for hours, unchanging, as if time was holding its breath. I didn't bother checking my phone. I knew what it would say. Still recalibrating. The photograph from booth 9 still sat in my pocket. I hadn't looked at it again. I was too afraid that if I did, the faces might have changed. Maybe I'd be the one with black eyes this time. I went to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection stared back, normal. Tired, pale, older than I remembered, but normal. I reached forward and touched the glass. My reflection didn't. I stepped back immediately. When I returned to the counter, a new customer was already seated. I hadn't heard the bell. I hadn't seen the door open. She was just there. Young woman, no older than 20. Red scarf, eyes swollen like she'd been crying. She didn't speak. She held a boarding pass tightly in her hands, knuckles white from the grip. It was stained and yellowed, creased in a way that made it look older than she was. I poured her a cup of coffee and set it down gently. After a few minutes, she asked me a question I hadn't expected. "What's behind the gate?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. She waited a moment, then gave a weak smile, stood up, and left her boarding pass on the counter. Flight 477, Gate 6, August 2nd, 1974. Another one. I opened the drawer, and there it was. The same flight number, the same gate, same date, from the boarding pass I picked up 2 nights ago. Something was wrong about that flight. All these passengers, they never left, or maybe they never arrived. I checked the terminal window. The blinking light at Gate 6 was still flashing soft and steady like a heartbeat. There were no planes on the runway, but the gate door was wide open, the kind of open that doesn't make sense, like it was calling something. At 1:33 a.m., the freezer door opened on its own. I heard it creak slowly behind me, but I didn't turn around. Not right away. When I finally did, the figure standing there wasn't human. It had the shape of a man, but no face. Just a swirl of static and darkness where the features should be. It wore the uniform of a diner cook, apron and all, and in its hands was a tray. It placed the tray on the counter. There was no food on it, just a single key. It was brass, tarnished, and heavy-looking. I didn't touch it. The cook thing didn't speak. It tilted its head slowly, almost confused by my silence. Then it stepped back into the freezer and shut the door behind itself. The tray stayed. The key stayed. I should have thrown it away, but instead I picked it up and placed it in my pocket beside the photograph. 2 items, neither of which I wanted. At 2:14 a.m., I noticed something strange about the booths. They had shifted. Booth 9 was no longer the 9th booth. It was now the 3rd, and I hadn't moved. The space around me had rearranged itself without a sound. The walls looked slightly narrower. The floor tiles were darker in shade. I checked the napkin holder. It had changed too. No longer chrome, but a dull, bone-like material that didn't reflect anything. I glanced toward the windows. They were black. Not just dark, completely black. Like the world outside had been turned off. Then the lights inside the diner began to dim. But this time they didn't flicker or pulse. They dimmed like candles running out of wick. One by one the bulbs overhead went out. Not with a pop, not with a sizzle, just quiet darkness. Until only one light remained, shining directly above booth 9, now 3rd in line. A figure was seated there again, but it wasn't anyone I'd seen before. It was me, wearing my apron, wearing my face. But the eyes were gone, replaced with flickering static. I blinked, he was gone. Booth 9 was empty again. The light above it flickered, then died. I stood in complete darkness, except for the light from the coffee machine, faint, red, steady. I approached the machine and watched it screen. It was scrolling something, not in words, but symbols. Old, alien-looking glyphs that made my eyes water. I looked away, and in the reflection of the carafe, I saw the entire diner filled with passengers, all of them seated, all of them waiting, every single booth, even the stools at the counter. Every face turned toward me. Their mouths were moving, no sound. I covered the reflection with a towel and walked into the kitchen, heart pounding. The air back there was humid now, wet, like a storm had passed through. I stepped carefully, water squishing beneath my shoes. On the far wall, someone had written something in steam. The gate is open. The plane is late. We wait. You've wiped it off and immediately regretted it. The wall behind it wasn't tile. It was metal, and it was pulsing like a heartbeat. At 4:06 a.m., a sound rang out across the diner, a boarding call, garbled, echoing from the speakers above the ceiling. Flight 7 for Gate 6, now, boarding. The words faded in and out. There was no intercom in the diner, no speaker. Still, the voice repeated every 10 minutes. No one entered, no one left, except for one man, the pilot, again. He walked in without a word and headed straight to the back. Not to booth 9, not to the counter, to the freezer. He opened it, stepped inside, and closed it behind him. I followed. Inside the freezer, there was no food, no shelves, just a staircase made of rusted steel, spiraling downward. I didn't follow him down. I closed the door again, and the world returned to normal as it ever was here. At 5:30 a.m., the girl with the red scarf returned. She didn't sit. She just stood by the window, looking toward the gate. "Do you ever think the plane never existed?" she asked. I didn't answer. She turned to me. "Maybe we're not waiting for a plane. Maybe the gate is waiting for us." Then she walked toward the diner door and stepped outside. The moment she crossed the threshold, she vanished. Not disappeared, vanished, like smoke caught in wind. It is 6:03 a.m. now. The sun should be up. It isn't. The diner lights are fading again. And the clock on the wall just blinked a message. Prepare for boarding. I don't know what's coming, but I think tonight might be my last shift. Or maybe it already was. The clock no longer moves. It just stares. 6:03 a.m., frozen in place, as if it's waiting for me to acknowledge something. The minute hand twitches every few seconds as though trying to advance, but it never does. It just shakes, stuck in time like the rest of this place. The sun hasn't risen. The windows are still pure black, not like night, but like the glass is painted over or pressed against something enormous. I made a mistake. I opened the drawer beneath the register, the one I was told not to touch. It had no handle, no lock, just a smooth wooden surface I had always ignored. But this time, it slid open without resistance. Inside, there was no cash, no receipts, just a single worn document, yellowed paper, typed in black ink, dated August 2nd, 1974. Passenger manifest, Flight 477, Gate 6. The names were typed out in a neat column. Some had been crossed out in red. Others were smudged beyond recognition. My name was on the list, Connor Maddox, typed perfectly. No smudge, no strike through. Beside it was a column labeled boarded with two options, Y or N. Mine was blank. At the very bottom, a final line had been added in pen. If no Y or N is recorded by end of shift, default to Y. My fingers went cold. I folded the paper and placed it back in the drawer. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me thinks it can't hurt me if I put it away. I know better now. At 12:33 a.m., the lights began to shift again. This time, they didn't pulse or flicker. They started moving, like a pattern, like runway lights, one after the other in a loop that traced the ceiling and outlined the booths, as if something invisible was preparing to land inside the diner. Booth 9 flashed 3 times, then stopped. No one sat there. I walked slowly to the kitchen and grabbed the key I had hidden in the flour bin, the brass one left by the faceless cook. I don't know what I thought it opened, but I had to try. I approached the bathroom first. Nothing. Then the office door, still locked. But the freezer, the key slid into a tiny lock I'd never noticed before at the base of the frame. It turned with a heavy click. The door opened wider than usual. Behind it was no longer the spiral staircase. It was a tunnel, carved in black rock, lined with flickering airport lights embedded in the stone. I stepped inside, just a few feet. The air was dense, almost liquid. I could barely breathe. The walls pulsed like veins. Far ahead, I could see movement, silhouettes, people in rows, not walking, just standing, waiting. I turned back. The door was still open, But the diner behind me had gone silent. No humming freezer, no distant airport announcements, just a pressure like the whole world was holding something in. I stepped out. The door closed on its own. The key snapped in half in my hand. At 2 a.m., a plane finally appeared, but not in the sky, not on the runway, inside, right outside the diner windows. It was massive, unmarked. The metal of its body didn't reflect light. It swallowed it. The windows were black like eyes staring into the diner. There was no engine noise, no whirring, no wind. It had simply arrived. The diner door opened by itself. A gust of air blew through, warm and heavy, smelling of oil and static. Then came the sound. Not a boarding announcement, not footsteps, just the roll of suitcase wheels on tile. One by one, passengers entered. Their faces were featureless now. Some still wore their old travel clothes, bell-bottoms, leather jackets, trench coats with airline pins. But their hands were stiff, their motions robotic. They didn't sit. They lined up directly across from the counter, staring at me. I backed up slowly until I hit the coffee machine. Then one of them stepped forward. A woman. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just skin stretched too tight, and yet she managed to speak. "We are missing one." I couldn't reply. Her voice was too clear, too human. It didn't come from her. It came from everywhere. "All others accounted for. You are last." I said nothing. She stepped forward again. "Manifest confirms." Another figure approached. The pilot. Same uniform. But his mouth was open too wide, and his eyes were sunken, blinking out of sync. He held the manifest in one hand, pointed to my name. "It is time." I ran. Out of the diner, through the terminal, past gates that no longer had numbers. The entire airport was deserted. The flight board above me was flashing one phrase over and over. "Now boarding." I didn't stop until I reached gate 6. The doors were open. A tunnel of black wind waited beyond, but no plane, just the sound of rushing air. Something deep inside was calling my name, not yelling, whispering, repeating it softly, over and over, like a lullaby. I turned away, walked back to the diner. The passengers were gone. The counter was clean. The booths were empty, but the manifest still sat where I left it. Now it had a check mark beside my name, a Y, in red. I didn't put it there. I swear I didn't. At 6 a.m., the sky outside lightened slightly. Not a sunrise, not hope, just a faint glow, like the world was remembering to breathe. I sat behind the counter, hands folded, waiting. A single napkin drifted across the floor from an unseen draft. I picked it up. Someone had written on it in trembling ink, "You can delay the flight, but not forever." I turned it over, a return boarding pass. Flight 477. My name printed across the top. The date was tomorrow. At least, that's what the napkin says. I woke up on the diner floor with the scent of burned coffee and ozone lingering in the air. My limbs ached. My apron was stained with something that looked like rust, but I know better. It wasn't rust. It had a smell, a weight. Outside, the blackness still pressed against the windows like the glass itself was underwater. The diner clock reads 6:06 a.m. again. It always returns to that. No matter when I check, no matter how long the night drags, it resets. Time here is circular. Everything comes back around. The boarding pass still sits beneath the napkin holder. Flight 477, Gate 6, my name on it now. But the date, today. I fold it carefully, slip it into my shirt pocket, and walk to the back. The freezer is gone. In its place is a single metal door with no knob. Just a symbol etched where the lock should be. 3 arrows, all pointing inward. I press my palm against it. The door is cold, then warm, then cold again. It doesn't open. Instead, I hear it. The intercom, that same static-coded voice. Final boarding call for Flight 477. All remaining passengers report to Gate 6. I return to the counter. Booth 9 is occupied. This time it's my father, but not as I remembered him. Not the way he looked when he died. Younger, wearing a pilot's uniform, smiling gently at me. He says nothing. He only nods as if acknowledging something I don't yet understand. I blink. He's gone. A steaming cup of coffee remains in his place. I do not touch it. I turn back toward the kitchen and I see her, the girl with the red scarf. She stands near the back wall, her eyes no longer puffy from crying. Her scarf is gone. Her face is calm. She looks peaceful. "Did you find the end?" I ask. She smiles. "There's no end, just your turn." She points toward the door again, not the diner's door, the one beside the counter, the one that was never supposed to open. It's wide open now. Beyond it is not the parking lot, not the terminal. Just a jet bridge, the kind you walk down to board a plane, except it stretches out into a dark void suspended in space that shouldn't exist. On either side are windows, and through them I see nothing but passengers seated in rows, all of them facing forward, waiting. I take a step toward it, then another. Each one feels heavier than the last, like the world is pressing down, urging me to stay. But I keep walking, down the corridor, toward the open fuselage of the plane. The door is shaped like a mouth. Inside, a single flight attendant stands, smiling with a face I can't quite remember. She doesn't ask for my ticket. She simply says, "You're the last one. Welcome aboard." I nod. Step inside. There's only one empty seat. 19A. Window. I sit. The other passengers don't look at me. They never do. But I feel their awareness, their patience. They have been waiting for me. As soon as I buckle the seatbelt, the engines begin to hum. Not like normal engines. It sounds like a memory trying to form, like the noise between radio stations. We begin to move, but not forward, up, sideways, through something that bends light and logic. There is no outside, only shadow, only static, then silence. I wake up. Not in my bed, not in the diner, but at gate 6. Empty, bright, clean, no passengers, no announcements, a boarding pass in my hand. Flight 478. New number, same gate, same time. The date reads tomorrow. I walk slowly toward the diner, unsure if it's still there. But it is, exactly as I left it. The booths reset, the coffee brewing, the freezer back in place. I walk behind the counter. The clock starts ticking again. 6:01 a.m. I hang my apron on the hook. Another one waits folded on the stool. A new name tag already attached. Different name. New person. Same job. Whoever walks through that door next will see the same rules taped to the fridge. They'll learn not to speak to passengers outside their assigned booths. They'll serve the coffee, wipe down the counter, and pretend they don't hear the voices behind the walls. But eventually, they'll find the manifest. They always do. And when they see their name, they'll understand. Just like I did. This place isn't a diner. It never was. It's a way station. Between arrival and departure. Between forgetting and remembering. Between life and whatever comes after. And we don't work here forever. Just until our flight is called. End of story.